put off by how long this video is, don't worry. I tend to jam-pack my videos with as much content, as many details as I possibly can, and I try to talk pretty fast. So while the video is a bit on the long side, I don't repeat myself, and I get into a lot of details about the subject that, pretty much anything that I feel I can comment on and that I think you might find interesting. But hey, if the video is just too long for you to watch, chances are I recorded a shorter version, and the link will be in the description box. It's not an inferior video, it's merely a Cliff's Notes version of this very video. Grand Theft Auto 3 video game review. Our until San Andreas cameo unnamed protagonist Claude is betrayed by Catalina, his girlfriend, during a robbery. So he of course is determined to get back the 70,000 that he stole legitimately, and along the way he will work his way to the top of the organized crime in Liberty City, which is basically the Grand Theft Auto universe version of New York. And yeah, this was the first mainstream hit of the series, and it's a fantastic first 3D entry in the... If they wanted to get gimmicky, they could have called it Grand Theft Auto 3D. Anyway, yeah, it's a great first 3D entry in the series. Of course, it does not have all the bells and whistles that we've come to expect, but it builds a solid foundation, and when you're playing this, you don't really feel like something is missing from the overall experience. I mean, I will admit, I have not played these beyond Vice City, so that's the only one I can really compare to, but with that one, they had added a lot, which is rather impressive because it came out like a year later than this. Yeah, it's like almost the opposite of the Assassin's Creed franchise, where, they start with very little and then they just take away until there's nothing left. Yeah, I will be drawing a number of comparisons to that franchise, in part to kind of highlight what I find are the problems of that franchise and why Grand Theft Auto is so much more inspired than Assassin's Creed. Assange's Creed is that, democracy is helped by the spread of information and, not killing specific powerful people, and Assassin's Creed is the polar opposite of that. Now, we have fairly little plot in this one. What we have is sort of just enough to keep us interested in the main plot. I mean, this is not really a game that stands or falls on plot, but what there is, yeah, Catalina betrayed you, and yeah, you see her in that opening sequence, so through the rest of the game, if you happen to see her, your interest spikes. You weren't bored before, but suddenly you're like, oh, this is really, I can get revenge on this woman. And that's a nice, yeah, it's a good subtle setup that doesn't really, it's uncomplicated. You really don't need to pay close attention to follow the plot as it pertains to Catalina. And with that, it works as a nice, subtle little thing. Like I said, you will see her, and you're not told this mission involves Catalina. It literally just suddenly she is part of a mission that you didn't expect. So that's, yeah, that's a good way to do it. It doesn't feel like, in general, you never know for sure if a mission will connect to the main plot or not. There were some that I really did not expect to be, yeah, connected, and they turn out to be, and then, yeah, you never really know where exactly the plot is going. It's quite subversive. I really can't give too many details about it to avoid spoilers, but they did a good job. But with this fairly limited sort of main drive of the plot, there is also not that much to build onto that. And really the main plot is not something that, yeah, at the end of the day, it's not that compelling, you might say. And some of the plot that is connected to the Catalina storyline, is a little weaker for it. Now, other than that, basically, you know, plot-wise, you do start at the very bottom. Like, the very opening has you freed from the prison transport by a friend of yours, 8-Ball. Take one guess at his ethnicity, and yeah, you're told, you know, drive back to this garage, and when you get there, literally, one of these low-level guys will tell you, I've got some work for you. And as you go, as you complete more missions, you will get new contacts. You will get in touch with people higher up among the ranks. And yeah, you literally will work your way to the very top. So there is this very genuine sense of accomplishment in, I mean, I've already said that some of the missions don't really feel like they necessarily contribute a whole lot to the overall story, but there is always this sense of accomplishment. You're getting somewhere. You're no longer small time. I mean, you literally start out as just a nobody who, you know, robbed a place, and you get, yeah, and over the course of the game, you get much further. And it's also, there's basically a lot of different areas in Liberty City have, yeah, there's some organized crime family or syndicate which is, you know, it's their turf. So if you, excuse me, anytime you are in that area, they will, excuse me, start attacking you, and this happens increasingly as you complete more and more missions, because you're making more and more enemies. Again, the opposite of Assassin's Creed, where it gets to be easier the longer you play, which makes no sense, because you're killing important people, and obviously they should be putting more people on you, and you don't change disguise in that game, so how could nobody have seen, well, there's a guy in a white hood. Anyway, so yeah, again, as a sense of accomplishment there, you're, you know, you're getting on a lot of people's enemies lists, and it increases the difficulty. And the really clever thing is, this is not limited to missions. You literally do, yeah, if you're, you know, one of the earliest families you are up against are the Triad, and anytime you go through Chinatown, they're gonna spot you and start attacking you. So if you have business near Chinatown, you'll want to keep that in mind. And this does affect just running around, you know, it's entirely open world, so you can go wherever you want, pretty much whenever you want, outside of missions. And yeah, it affects that, and it affects side missions. So yeah, I should go into the world. In fact, the world feels very alive. There's a lot of dynamic stuff going on there. again, to draw a direct comparison to Assassin's Creed, where in both there is a certain amount of control over the various things that go on in this world, in that game you feel like it's all under your control and you're godlike, and that's not fun for a game. You need challenge. Here it's less reined in, there are less checks and balances. I mean, things can happen in this game where you're like, that was not supposed to happen. I saw fights break out independently of me. Like, I figured that somebody bumped into somebody else, but yeah, suddenly 2 or 3 guys were fighting each other on the in the middle of the street. And again, this is not something that just happens all the time, but if under the right circumstances, it will happen. There are some vague rules for this world guiding the AI and such. You know, comparatively, also the traffic will tend to be running smoothly unless you mess it up, or some of your pursuers mess it up. If there's a big car chase going on, and one of your pursuers, or you know, slam right into another car, that might start messing up traffic, and that again makes things interesting. And traffic is rather randomized, but yeah, it's less reined in, and very few things are under your control. Basically, you're a guy. You might have some name recognition, although you don't have a name until San Andreas cameo, but whatever. But other than that, you're a guy, you got some guns, you can steal cars. That's about it. You are not immortal at all. There's a very real sense of danger and risk in the game. You feel like, I was very aware of the possibility that I might get killed on the way to or from a mission. I will get more into that later, but yeah, just there's an ever-present sense of danger because you are making enemies, and some of them very well armed. I mean, they won't pursue you out of the turf, but sooner or later you're gonna have to go back into that area. You know, you might want to think twice before you burn any bridges. You might want to... This is one of the... as far as somewhat more recent games, I mean, it's from 2001, but this is one of the ones where you actually have to plan, and, you know, I don't want to say that there's, like, real puzzle solving, but you do have to think before you just go in, you know, go directly into a situation. Now, I'll get more into that as well, but yeah, it's the world, basically, yeah, the traffic is completely randomized. You don't know what cars will be there when. You know, when you pull into a certain street, you'll see the traffic there, but you couldn't have guessed it before then. Like, there are certain areas that are, like, there's another gang called the Diablos, and in their turf, of course, they're driving around in their specific car. I don't remember the exact name of it, but and stuff like that. But other than that, yeah, it's completely randomized, and people's behavior is randomized. Like, some civilians will run away screaming, even at you pulling a gun, which again is very interesting. So many of these action games, you're running around with guns drawn all the time, but here, yeah, you literally, if you don't want to cause too much trouble, you're just running around with just your fists out. That doesn't attract any attention, obviously. And some will, you know, aggressively try to fight you. Maybe more if you, like, try to fight them, or if you steal their car. Some will literally try to take back the car or rip you out of the car and then start beating you up on the ground if they can. and then, you know, further some will give up if you start fighting back after they've ripped you out of the car, and so on and so forth. You can't really tell, and some of the low-ranking criminals, some of the like street thugs, will literally rip you out of a car. I've had this happen to me during a mission, and I'm just sitting there. Are you freaking kidding me? I've got 4 stars. I just did a freaking bank robbery. I've got 4 guys in the car that I gotta keep alive, and you're pulling me out of my car. And it's glorious because you never know, and you always may suddenly have to deal with something like that. It's fantastic. You know, police presence is also randomized, which, you know, directly, you know, affects how long it takes before police really start chasing you. Like, you can steal a ton of cars without the police noticing, but if there's a police car, like, on the same street, he'll notice. And, yeah, he'll start chasing you. Now, that pretty much takes care of all for the world. Then we have things that don't necessarily affect things so much. The weather, which is also in part randomized, and it also follows the time of day, which I'll get into next, where really there's rain, and after which you'll see like rainbows, and like the streets will be a little reflective, like, you know, puddles of water will reflect. You know, you have just clear, you have foggy, and, you know, and then you have like nighttime, and it's really cool. The moment your character gets into the car, if it's nighttime, he'll turn on the lights. If once it becomes daytime, he'll turn the lights back off. And a lot of these things that happen without your control are purely aesthetic, which again is a huge difference from Assassin's Creed, where as the games went on, and yes, the third one is by far the worst offender in this case, the game would take more and more decisions away from you, to the point where you're really just pressing directional buttons or holding a button down, and the game kind of decides what exactly happens when. And here, the things that and another example is, if, you know, your car, if someone is like fleeing your car, or you bang the side of the car into something, the car door might be partially open, and as you drive, it'll like flap back and forth. And if there's a quiet moment in the driving, Claude will just reach over and pull the door shut. And this doesn't affect your ability to drive or anything. It's just a nice little thing that, yeah. Now, the world clock, I wish more games would do this, but yeah. To be fair, Assassin's Creed, at least the third one, basically does this. It just doesn't show the clock, which, considering the time it's set, is fair enough. But yeah, you can really tell what time of day it is anytime. And where basically a minute of the game clock's time is in reality a second. So yeah, sometimes you'll be told for a mission you have to be, you know, you literally, you can't start. There's a certain early mission where you have to go rob a bank, and, well, the bank has opening hours, so you gotta start the job not too far away from the opening hours, and then you have to get the bank robbers to the bank within opening hours, and this whole thing, and it's a small thing, but it really works. And yeah, there's like an assassination mission where you literally are told the target will leave this particular establishment at this particular time, and like depending on when you start the mission, it'll usually be like 2 game hours away, meaning 2 minutes or so, maybe it's 3, but yeah, and it's a subtle thing, but it makes the world feel more real, feel more alive. Of course you can't rob a bank outside, well, you could, but it would be a different kind, it wouldn't be a heist anymore. And yeah, just in general, it really works. And again, with the weather changing and with it being nighttime or daytime, you can really tell the difference if it's like between like clear and like foggy, if it's a difficult mission, if there's a lot of chasing going on, you want to be able to see well. And to get back to this thing of, you have to sort of, prepare or think, plan ahead. The game doesn't usually tell you you'll need this or that gun, or you'll need so and so much ammo. You're not told how many you will be up against. So some missions can be completed like without any weapons whatsoever, but some of the tougher ones you really will want to have not only guns, but good guns and a substantial amount of ammo for them. And this is possible to get, but yeah, the game doesn't tell you. It's again this thing of, yeah, it's very intuitive. It's a game that is full of these intuitive decisions that the player has to make, but you do have to make them. Like the game, you can't choose difficulty settings in this game, there's only the one, but depending on how much you apply yourself, the game will be, challenging or extremely challenging. If you don't really think, if you just go straight into it and expect like a tutorial to constantly be guiding you, yeah, that's not going to work out well for you. Another example is that there's a huge difference between if you already know the area when you're approaching a mission or like a side mission, or yeah, if you're just going, yeah, just sort of winging it, if you've just gotten access to an area and you immediately go for some of the missions before exploring. It's a game that very much rewards exploring, and again, it doesn't tell you to explore. It's just, well, you're going to be driving around these streets, you might even be chased down these streets. You might want to know how you get to the different areas. I should point out, the game only has a minimap, and it's fairly limited in showing what, the different, like, it has a few, like, points of interest marked on the minimap if you get close enough, like safe houses, which is these are the only places you can actually save your game, and mission contacts, and then during missions it'll show some targets, not all. With Vice City we got an actual map where you can go into the menu and just look up where am I even on the map. This doesn't have that. If you want one, well, you basically have to sit down with a pen and paper and fill it out yourself. It's possible. You have a compass with the minimap, and yeah, the minimap does show nearby streets and such, but yeah. And again, this is something that really, I appreciate that they gave us a map in Vice City, but I can also I can really respect that you don't really get a map. That's, yeah, that is seriously old school, and that is badass. And even with the map that you get in like Vice City, you still will need to know a little, like, if you're driving into an area that you've only seen on the overall map, you will still not know exactly how the streets connect, and is that a tunnel, a bridge, or a regular street. So that's really cool. anyway, of course, today you don't have to sit there with a pen and paper. You can just go online and print it out. And yeah, that brings me nicely into the side missions, which basically, if you steal an ambulance, a police car, a taxi, or a fire truck, then there is a jump in, jump out side mission activation button, and yeah, you can be spending some time, you know, picking up sick people that are literally bleeding profusely, so you gotta get them to the hospital because they're stuck together in a very uncomfortable position, and you have a time limit. And like, you know, all of these side missions have time limits. The police cards, like vigilante missions, where you gotta go find the specific criminals and mark it on the minimap, kill them, move on to the next one. Taxi is just transportation, and fire truck is putting out fires. And these are all a lot of fun, and for being put together by fairly simple rules, they are quite different from each other and all very enjoyable to play and very challenging as well. It's a game that definitely challenges you. And in general, that is true of the mission setups. Like, I've already alluded a little bit to, like, there's assassination, there's transportation, you know, you might have to ram another car, or at least destroy another car. Yeah, get to a certain point within a time limit, or, you know, chase someone, tail someone, different kinds of things, and it isn't a lot of variation. Like, these different rules are fairly simple, but they tweak and toy around with these different settings just enough that missions don't really feel like the same. They're all quite varied and enjoyable. Now, I suppose I could go. Now, I've already talked about this first with the 3D engine. It is thus also the first with a third-person perspective rather than the bird's eye view. Although you can, and I believe this is for the last time in the franchise, still engage in the bird's eye view, both in a car and on foot. And in fact, in a car you can also always look backwards, look over your shoulder, which is extremely useful a lot of the time. And yeah, so within the car you also have access to like half a dozen different angles, and while some of them seem very similar to each other, they're all useful for different situations, and really they run the gamut. Like, I never sat there and thinking like, oh man, I wish they had put in this angle. Like, there's the basic third person, then the camera can go closer to the car and slightly above, angled down, so you can see closer in front of you than you could before, and also slightly further. There's one that literally, it's like a first person, like, it attaches the camera to the bumper, I guess, of the car. I'm not a car person, you'll have to forgive me. You know, there's a cinematic camera, which is mostly just badass. It's very car movie-esque. Like, if you're just driving down the street, the camera will be in front of the car, following it as it passes, you know, yeah. And then there is this... Actually, I suppose that does pretty well cover them. That brings me nicely into just car stuff, because in general, these camera angles are often things that I recognize from full-on car games. Now, I will admit I've had rather limited exposure to car games. Again, not a car person, but so with this camera, this does get some of the things you would expect from a full-on car game, and certainly it's, I would say that it includes all that is reasonable to expect, because it is, of course, a bit more, I'd say it's going more for mainstream appeal. You can play this without necessarily being in love with cars. I mean, I've played, I don't know, 4 different Grand Theft Auto games, and I've got more waiting, but, you know, I've barely played any Need for Speed. Does that franchise even exist anymore? Anyway, you know, back in the 90s I played a little bit of Need for Speed. And, yeah, basically, where it doesn't really have what you might expect from a regular car game is mostly in the car's handling. The gear shifting is simplified somewhat. Like in this game, you can go, you know, 0 to 60 in most cars, or to reaching top speed within a very short amount of time. So, like, you know, acceleration and gear shifting has been simplified somewhat. And most cars are, like, handling does differ. I will definitely say that, and sort of the weight of the car, how easily it tips over and such, is different for each car and very specific to each car, but it is also simpler than in full-on car games. Now, with that said, the physics are quite cool. Like, again, there are these fast-paced chases, and if your car just like hits a, you know, and if it gets up in an angle, it might end up on its side or totally flipped over. And some of the lighter cars you can make flip over several times, but you gotta be careful and stop it at the right time so that it doesn't flip all the way over but lands back on its wheels. And of course, if it flips all the way over, which again can happen anytime, you literally are looking at the car's gonna blow up and it's gonna catch fire and blow up, and you're gonna have to crawl out of it. You can't just, you know, open the door and comfortably leave it like you could when it was, you know, on its wheels regularly. And this again can really mean just death at any time. And if you're driving across a bridge, watch your speed, because if it's a car that you can't right very quickly and you slam into another car, or you know, you don't turn quite enough, so you hit a corner or something, you might go flying off the bridge and into the water, and well, that's, you know, you just died. So yeah. And you'll also want to watch for police, because if they just pull you out of the car just like that, they're going to arrest you. So yeah. And yeah, the where the physics do get really frustrating is in things like the jump and sailing. Like, the jump is this awkward kind of, he doesn't jump very far up, he kind of hops. It's like he's just yeah, bunny hopping, and rather than clearing an obstacle, if he at all touches it, he will bounce back like a rubber ball, and that can be really frustrating when you're trying to clear an obstacle that you know you should be able to clear. It's just because you're not standing quite far enough back or something. You know, there isn't, you can't just climb over it. Nope, you have to use this really irritating jump. That, yeah. And there are a few awkward control issues like that. Also, sometimes if you've just left a car, or whenever you're in a garage, which is where you store cars, those are always connected to safe houses, or usually connected to safe houses. Some of them are mission specific. And right after, like, dying and such, the controls might freeze for a little bit, I'm not talking about while you're, like, dead. I'm talking about after you've come back. The controls might freeze, and in garages and such, the camera will sort of get static, and there is this, suddenly your control keys become directional, like if, whatever direction Claude is facing, it's kind of awkward, and it's a good thing it's only in the garages. Because other than that, it is your average third-person shooter. You've got the strafing in this whole thing. Now, I've fairly defined the genre already. Now let me talk a little bit about the third-person shooting. It's not good. It is not an aspect that the game does well with. Having now played Max Payne 3, it does not seem like Rockstar are that comfortable with third-person shooters, but I will hold off my final judgment on that until I've played more of the Grand Theft Auto games, because I understand that it gets better than this. And again, let's keep in mind, this was the first foray into 3D, so I'm not at all saying, I'm very much saying this is highly impressive. There are some things where it, could be better. The third-person shooting is very awkward. Like, the AI can sort of... Thankfully, I should also mention, there is not a lot where you are forced to go into the shooting. It's mostly based around the cars, and in general the vehicles, but primarily the cars. You can also sail and sometimes shoot from the boat, and if you steal a police boat, and fly. So and sailing is like I said about the physics, just to quickly finish that one off. Excuse me, with the sailing, the water kind of bounces constantly, and in part it throws off like your control of the boat, and this is something where the boat controls less smoothly than the cars do. But lost my train of thought, but the third-person shooting, that's right. With the AI can usually, they will be placed in strategic positions a lot of the time, and they can sort of shoot from partial cover. There is no cover mechanic in this game, and your character will typically kind of have to just step right into the fray and just start shooting. And you get stun locked whenever you get hit with any kind of, like, not just anything, but if it's a powerful weapon or like a punch to the face. And I'm not saying this shouldn't be, it makes sense, but it's frustrating because you're always outnumbered, and with that, the enemies can very easily overpower you, and you sort of have to always be running away from enemies rather than just, like, compare this to a game like Max Payne 1, which came out around the same time, same year I believe, certainly, where you really don't so much have to run away from enemies. You just have to think about, okay, what order do I kill them in, when do I use the shoot dodge, kind of thing. And even, we don't have to go with a game that has a shoot dodge mechanic. Early in, like, what's it called? Dark Forces 2 The Jedi Knight, you don't have any force powers yet, but you can play it as a third-person shooter. You might want to go into first-person mode, but for better aiming and all, but it works, and in this, it's because of the weight of the main character, and this is again something I see in Max Payne 3. you kind of just keep moving in a certain direction a little past when you stop pressing the button to go in that direction. It's like your character just has to catch up with, oh wait, I shouldn't go in that direction anymore. Like he's carrying a lot of weight, yeah. And yeah, it makes the shooting awkward and sometimes downright frustrating. There are parts of this game where the challenge level gets downright frustrating. And again, you really will want to go get yourself a map. It's really... Actually, you know what, that might be more of a... I am terrible at, like, you know, direction kind of thing, especially when it's so open. So, you know what, if you are entirely comfortable with just memorizing the street names and what path leads to where, then you might not need a map, but yeah. Now, to get back to the crime families, you work for more than one family, which is quite cool, and you actually, your loyalties will have to be flexible. Let's put it that way. Also, you may just get double-crossed, so watch out for that. The mobsters feel organic, like everyone has personality in this, like even Claude, and he never speaks, but there are these subtle characterizations. Like, he does not necessarily have the most patience for... just... There are these subtle little things. There's one point where he's heading to meet someone, and it's like this Japanese setting, and like he just barges right in. There's no, you know, gradually, and once he actually gets to the guy he's getting the mission from, he slows down and does the bow. So there is this sort of thing of, you know, I may not be the most important person in the world, but you don't own me. So yeah. Now, yeah, everyone has personality. Like, there's the elderly head of the mobsters, Salvatore Leone, I believe is his name. There's this, you know, and he has this wild, spoiled brat of a daughter, and yeah, just various characters. I don't want to give too many of them away, but, and it's also worth noting, this has some substantial acting talent behind it. Kyle MacLachlan, Joey Pants, I believe, Michael Madsen, and he is priceless. Like, dude's got mother issues. His character in this game has mother issues, and it's so much fun, and he seems to have enjoyed it tremendously. He throws himself into the character. And the acting does tend to be great, but there are times when... Catalina is not a great actress. She's not even an actress in parts, I would say. It gets really over the top with her at times. But on the whole, there is a real... Yeah, there's talent there, and some of the voice acting is somewhat silly and over the top, but it's supposed to be, and it's the right kind. Like, you can tell when someone is just being silly and they don't really understand how to be silly, and when it's someone who actually has comedic timing, comedic talent. Like, there's a radio call-in show, and at one point, literally one of the callers just calls in and badgers the host, Laszlo, about his unusual name. And it's so silly, but at the same time, you can't really point to him and say, well, that's poorly done, or did they just bring someone in from the street? No, they knew what they were doing. Now, among the different crime families are, I've already mentioned the Triad, you work for the Mafia, there's some Mexicans, a Colombian drug cartel, Yakuza. Now, the further you get in the game, the more areas get unlocked. And there are, I believe, there are 3 total islands in the, yeah. Now, the writing is varied and clever. It gets quite subversive. Like if you make a quote-unquote obvious mistake, the game will literally say, "You idiot," or "Yeah, you failed," you know, just, yeah. And as the previous entries also would. Now, the satire, which is plentiful, is often over the top, but it has a point. It's smart satire. It's not the kind of just let's be offensive satire, which I see in a lot of games from around this time. It's been a while since I played it, but if I recall, Postal 2 is pretty much just let's be offensive satire. But here, I've already mentioned the call-in show. People will call in and complain about, like, yeah, just a wide variety of things, and it really goes in and actually looks at this subject. The satire tends to be characters stating what they, what they're really like. They're, it's not, so yeah, it's that sort of satire, and like literally, it has a concerned mother calling in, complaining about kids being affected by video games, and there's in fact also an ad for this video game. It's Pogo the Monkey, where, yeah, the monkey literally has springs for legs and uses a banana cannon and such, and the kid of this parent apparently crafted in arts and crafts a banana cannon and started firing it, and she's complaining about it. You're just sitting there thinking, that didn't actually happen, and if it did, give the kid a prize, give the kid a scholarship. That's insane. It crafted a banana cannon in arts and crafts. That takes skill, lady. Be proud, not upset. And it really kind of highlights this, the kind of the argument of, oh, but the children will imitate. How will they imitate some of these things? And I'm not going to go too much into that here, but they the argument, it's a debate worth having. If how far should video games be allowed to go, and what video games should children get to play and such. There wasn't even always a rating system for video games, but it kind of, good satire makes you think, and that's what the satire in this game does. It goes and says, well, wait, could they actually imitate just everything? And another complaint the woman has is like, oh, now he's like chasing coins because of the game. Yeah, I think that's called capitalism, lady. But yeah, anyway, I suppose that brings me nicely into the radio stations in the game. It's a mix of licensed and original music, and much to the game's credit, I had a hard time telling which is which. There are 8 different music stations, and then there's the talk radio. And these music stations will have 15 to 25 minutes of content, and then they repeat. Whereas the radio talk station has 58 minutes. And yeah, it's all well worth listening to. Every genre of music pretty much is here and or parodied here. And by the way, the radio DJs are hilarious. They're really goofy. Like the 80s station has this woman who's like stuck in the 80s and constantly talking about, oh, I had a lot of fun back then, and it just, you get this sense that she just, you know, yeah, she really hasn't done anything since then, and it's sad and really funny, but yeah, like I said, the music tends to be worth listening to, and I'm usually extremely picky about music, so they really, in fact, let me, the genres include pop rock, classical, reggae, rave, rap, and yeah, the 80s music. And me enjoying classical music or reggae, that's quite unusual, but it happened here, so that's really cool. They were careful with their choices. Also, the classical, it maybe helps that the classical ones, they're ones you probably already know of. They've been used to comical effect in movies that are famous. So yeah, not always comical effect, but they've been used. So yeah. Now there's a pretty good level of interactivity with the overall world. Like, not, you can't go and touch every little thing, but like pretty much everything you drive the car into will react to it. Like if you run into a stoplight or, you know, a street lamp or something, it'll get knocked over, but it won't just like disappear, like basically the newspaper boxes, I don't know. Yeah, the little stands where you buy newspapers, but there isn't actually a person there. Those pretty much disappear as you run through them, but yeah, stoplights and such, they get knocked over, and then it's like, you know, it might be a good idea to swerve, to try to avoid the stoplight. And then, again, what I really love about these games is you can typically get the people chasing you to drive into things, and that's why, you know, it's a good idea to familiarize yourself with the world. Again, explore, intuitive decisions. Once you know how the different things act in the world, you can lure other people into them. I mentioned before that if a car gets knocked over, it'll catch fire. You can use that, not only making other people's cars flip over. If your own car flips over, you can even make it flip over, you know, or just make it take enough damage that it'll catch fire and then blow up. As long as you get out of the car and a little bit away, like, police might stop their car near yours, and so if you get out of your car and it then blows up, the cops won't get away. They, at the very least, their car will blow up as well, and they'll be like thrown down to the street, you know, and you can try to make your escape. So yeah, it's non-linear. You can choose where to take this chase, you know, unless you're on a mission. Now, the realism does not quite extend to ammo carrying capacity. At one point, I was carrying literally, what was it, 6,000 something rounds for one of the guns. So yeah. Now, I should maybe also say, it's not until Vice City that interiors of buildings particularly gets to be a thing in this. It's really only exteriors. Now, one thing that's quite clever about ammo carrying capacity is that you don't tend to upgrade it just by finding guns on the street. Though at that point it'll only go to a certain level. You have to buy them in the gun shops, which, again, that's something you have to find before it gets to a certain level. Otherwise, excuse me, yeah. So again, You've got to find that shop, and you've got to spend some money, and to spend that money, you'll have to have completed some missions. You can also cause destruction, but unlike the, you know, the previous games in the series, that is less of a, you know, yeah, less of an option. It doesn't give as much, or give, yeah. Now, the graphics are quite blocky. They really show their age, but the level of detail on faces is actually pretty decent, and they even sync up lip movements, so yeah. The places where the graphics get at their worst is actually, ironically, with natural things that look entirely unnatural, like trees, I've already mentioned water, fire, like the flamethrower is a good gun, so is the Molotov, by the way, but flames really look bad. It's hard to tell where the flame ends. Like, once you get a flamethrower, familiarize yourself with it so you don't accidentally torch, well, you know, stuff near you. Yeah, it's yeah. Now, one of the most irritating things about the graphics is that trees that are ugly as sin, by the way, literally block your view a lot of the time. If you're, like, there's a certain area that's literally a park, and anytime you go into it, you really risk, you know, anytime you're near a tree, it might just block your view, and that's rather frustrating. Again, I can imagine they addressed this in later games. I don't think they had in Vice City, but it has been a little while since I played Vice City. Now, this has more cutscenes than the earlier games. And this extends to both briefings and mid-mission, you know, yeah, to forward the story and the like. These are entirely utilitarian in nature. They're very simple in just the camera work and the basic setups. And yeah, they get the job done. They tell you what your mission is, or they convey something that you have to pay attention to. Yeah, tell a little bit of story, stuff like that. And they are mostly skippable, especially the briefing ones. Now, the level of detail is high on things that are closer to you, and whenever you're in motion, new areas will be rendered, and this is a process that's invisible to the player. I understand that originally this made this game run slower, and then they, you know, changed it around in Vice City to make it render less, or render areas closer. I find that this, and again, this is, of course, this is me playing it today on a high-end computer. I find that this does a better job than Vice City. I recall a lot of times in Vice City where literally just, you know, turning around or looking backwards and then looking front again would make cars disappear, and like you're thinking, okay, as soon as that car gets near, I'll jack it, and then you look around, oh, the car's gone, and that's really frustrating. That brings me nicely into some of the more of the randomization. I've already talked about how the traffic will, you know, be randomly generated, and like you might be, it won't necessarily go your way. It literally will be like you have to get from point A to point B in a certain amount of time, and there's not a lot of room, you're maybe being chased, and there's a ton of cars in front of you that you have to swerve between because you don't have time to wait and follow traffic normally. And so it literally has, and simultaneously, you know, on the other hand, you might be stuck with, you know, your car just blew up or something, you have to get another car, and you're just like, okay, please someone drive by, and, you know, I'll be able to, you know, I'll get in front of their car, slow them down enough, grab their car, drive off. And sometimes this won't happen just as you hope, and you might have to just run to another street, see if there's traffic somewhere that you can get, because traffic isn't always equally heavy at, you know, all times or in all areas, and simultaneously there might be so few cars, or you might only be able to, you know, yeah, like I said, run in front of them and stop some of them, and so you might be left, you know, hoping for a sports car, but stuck with this big, heavy thing that's going to take forever to drive off in. And yeah, it's a really great, yeah, the game is full of wild cards. You never know exactly how something is going to turn out, and any attempt at a mission is going to be entirely, you know, or at least it's going to be partially dynamic. By the way, I neglected to mention about the side missions earlier. You, like I said, it's jump in, jump out. No matter where you are, the moment you press it, dynamically there will start being objectives, you know, people for you to pick up, you know, fires for you to put out. And yeah, this is literally, no matter where you are, anytime you can start this, and it will get quickly increasingly difficult. Now, there is some gore in this. You can shoot some limbs off, especially with some of the heavier guns. And in fact, again, I've already mentioned this a little bit, but yeah, cars indeed, they're divided into sections, and if you ram the front of your car into something, it's the front of the car that gets damaged. You know, if the side of the car gets smashed enough times, the car door will eventually fall off, and things like that, so that's really cool. Now, among the weapons, I've already mentioned the melee. It's actually, you can stun lock enemies as well. You just need to get the you know, the first hit in, and some enemies are tougher to take out with it. You can also get a bat if you want to use, you know, if you don't want to use bullets, but you want it to be a little more effective. And then there's, of course, your average, you know, the pistol, shotgun, submachine gun. Already mentioned the flamethrower, an assault rifle. There tends to be only one kind of each gun. This is again something where they expanded in Vice City. There's also a sniper. It's awesome, but it's sadly not quite as useful as you might think. Like, there are a few missions where it comes in really handy, but on the whole, you might already have guessed. Yeah, limited sort of range for what you can really see and do is gonna mean that a sniper isn't the most useful. There's of course also a rocket launcher, like in the earlier games. Now and you know, grenades. Now you usually have more than one source of missions, and again, you can't necessarily tell what mission will really affect the plot and which one will just be something that doesn't particularly add to it, but just it fleshes out the world. You know, and missions always make sense. Like there was one or two that got a little bit contrived, but the mission objectives and what you're doing, like I said, a bank robbery, yeah, because you're working for organized crime, so there, you know, yeah, bank robberies, assassinations, yeah. Now, I suppose. Yeah, the different. I've already mentioned that the safe houses are the only place you can save, and you know you can only buy guns and ammo at the gun stores. Like you can get sometimes you can get ammo and guns elsewhere, but again that's the only place you can really increase the ammo beyond a certain level. I think once you've gotten it to a certain level, you can go back to that certain level even if you spend a lot of the ammo or lose it or something. Now that's again part of where this easily beats Assassin's Creed. You have these things that can aid you. In fact, I neglected to mention one of them. You can also repair your car and have it resprayed. It's one shop that does both. And have it resprayed so that the cops won't be able to recognize it. This instantly brings your wanted level down to 0. I think it goes to like 6, and the higher it is, the more cops will be on you, and once it gets to like 3 or 4, we're talking FBI, beyond that, army, and yeah, they will send in tanks after you, yeah. And the great thing is, these things, they're there, but they're not on every single street corner. You have to memorize or write down where they are and actually get your way to, like if you're in the middle of a big chase and you have to get the car resprayed, well, where's the respray shop? You were smart enough to think of noting where it was before you went on the mission, right? Or if you fail the mission because you couldn't find it, well, why did it go wrong? Well, I should have known where the respray shop was. Okay, before you try the mission again, find the respray shop, note where it is, and get there the next time you do the mission. There is sometimes a little too much trial and error involved, but especially with some missions not being entirely clear what might fail the mission for you. And sometimes, like, there are a bunch of timed missions, but sometimes the timer means if you don't do it within this time limit, you lose. Sometimes the time limit just means this is the amount of time you have to get to this certain place, and the like. So that can be a little frustrating, but yeah, in general, it adds challenge that these things are there in Liberty City, but if you don't know where they are, or you haven't, or you don't really know where you're driving, then that's just it. And again, in Assassin's Creed, you can hide and just wait it out pretty much everywhere. There's, just find a place that has, a hiding spot and hide, and that's it. And yet, some people do say that this game lacks consequences, and I have to believe that these people were taught logic by the likes of William Lane Craig. Okay, you're not forced to load if you fail or get arrested, and you do have unlimited lives. Welcome to the, the end of the mid-90s of video gaming, guys. And you don't stay in prison if you get arrested. I don't even know how that would work. But you do lose a lot with the, again, welcome to the medium of gaming. This is just how it works. I don't, if you get arrested or if you get killed, you'll lose all your weapons and ammunition. You lose some money. If you were on a mission that was now lost, you can't just go back and this is, that might sound silly. Well, have you played BioShock? In there, die, come right back, and yeah. It just, and the great thing about it is, again, like I said earlier, you might get killed on the way to or from a mission. If you get killed on the way away from a mission before you got to save your game, you're now thinking, okay, Can I complete that mission again? Do I want to go through that mission again? Or do I want to start gathering all those weapons again? And it's not like just going, again, it's not going around the corner. It's not even going to just one gun shop. You've got to go to a bunch of different ones to get all the weapons. And certainly it'll cost you if you got to buy a bunch of ammo. So, in fact, this is a game with a lot of consequences. I mean, you could argue that any game that has a load feature or more than one life is, you know, has fewer consequences than real life. If you make a mistake, you can just do it, you know, try again. But then, yeah, I don't really see why people single this out as, oh, there's no consequence. It has more consequence than a lot of games. You just can't die permanently or go to jail permanently. And that's it. Now, the game includes 3 square miles for you to explore. And, in fact, adding to the consequence, the number of in-game days spent is obviously inversely proportional to your bragging rights. You know, every time you save, the world clock skips ahead 6 hours. You know, you rested, and yeah, that shows that, well, you saved, so it takes more time. And you know, basically, once you've completed this game, if you want to see if you can, like, you know, compete with other people's times, you can just start a new game, play all the missions again. The less you save and the less times you fail a mission and such, you know, if you get out of the hospital, if you get arrested, that, I believe, also forwards the time, the game clock. So yeah, you know. Now, I suppose that more or less covers it. I'm not going to comment too much on the controversy, at least not in this video. But yeah, I've pretty much already said my piece as far as I'm going to in this video. I can appreciate that there are, you know, yeah, this game has plenty of consequences, and yes, you can do some things that are really mean-spirited. You can pick a fight with anyone on the street, including old ladies with, you know, a full grocery bag in each hand. But the game doesn't so much reward or encourage that as just allow it. The missions don't tend to involve hurting civilians or even police. It usually, targets tend to be other criminal organizations. And in fact, the side missions are either neutral or downright positive towards other people. You're putting out fires, you're saving people with an ambulance, and then you get into the more neutral territory with, you know, transportation as far as a taxi cab. And, you know, the vigilantism is obviously illegal, but, you know, then you get into that whole debate of you know, is it good, is it right to just kill criminals? But, yeah. Now, the game is very satisfying. You feel a real sense of accomplishment. I've already gone into this some, but you really earn every victory. You like I said, you're going around gathering all these weapons and ammunition. You get yourself a really good fast car for the mission. You know, you plan ahead. You memorize, you know, where the different street. It's a hugely different thing to approach a mission just blind, you know, just at the very start of the game, or once you've actually explored some. And every time you get access to a new area, you get to make that choice again. Do I want to explore this area, or do I just jump right into the missions? Now, there's a nice amount of different areas among these 3 islands. Like there's a real inner city area complete with a neon lit red light district, and I believe I already mentioned Chinatown. On one of the other islands there are suburbs with, you know, houses that look the same in a long row, and yeah. I suppose that more or less covers it. Yeah, it's a nice open game. You can go pretty much anywhere, and yeah, exploring. In addition to learning the areas, you might also find a place that has a gun pickup. There are hidden packages, you know, things like this. I've spent 24.5 hours playing this game, and I'm only at 40%. I'm doing the review now because I did complete the game. You know, there is an actual end to the game, but as you may already know if you're familiar with the franchise, you can play on afterwards. And to close off the review and the comparison to Assassin's Creed and in general other lesser, you know, imitations of the Grand Theft Auto approach to gaming, there's actually stuff to do after you've completed the game, after you've completed the missions. There's exploring to do which will net you things that actually, like I mentioned the hidden packages, I believe it's every time you get 10 of them, you get another weapon pickup placed at your safe house. That is awesome. That is well worth, you know, collecting these packages for, even though you really have to look around to find them all. And, you know, even once you, I mean, after I had completed Vice City, I was still playing it because you can pick a fight with someone, you can get into just these, you can get into a massive car chase and get just, like I mentioned, even the military chasing you, and you can see how long you can keep that going. You know, blast either one of the 8 radio stations, or I haven't even mentioned this yet, you can play your own MP3s. All you need to do, literally the one requirement is that they're MP3 files. You just gotta put them in the 2 requirements. Among the requirements are it being an MP3 file and putting it in the folder called like MP3 or something, in the game folder. And as far as I know, there's no limit to how many you put in there, and it will just play them and play them. The radio, again, it's kind of out of your control. You don't choose when the radio plays a certain thing because it's a radio. You're not in control of the radio. So it just plays on a loop. And yeah, you might be changing between the different radio stations looking for something you want to listen to at that moment, like in real life. And in fact, just to completely close it off, I should maybe say, again, unlike Vice City, you can't shoot tires off cars in this. There are no motorcycles, so they're like only cars, the one type of boat. I've at least only found one type of boat, and I believe also only one type of plane. So, yeah. Please rate and comment, and hey, if you like this video, that subscribe button's just waiting for you to click it.